Okay, so I am now going very quickly just to have a look in some real detail at some of the headings and the guidance in the new template. Um, so first of all, a very quick overview. I think as Ella said, the new template is for intervention reviews. Um, but templates for other kinds of reviews are in development. So there will be templates developed for DTA reviews, for qualitative evidence syntheses, etc. And they will be coming soon. Um, I think, yeah, it's important to emphasize, I think on my second bullet point, and Ella has already said this as well, but it does bear repeating. We don't expect the template to kind of, fix any issues with how reviews are conducted, and the authors still need to follow the MASIA conduct standards. What the template is designed to do is to structure the reporting of reviews to improve that. Okay, so there is one template for protocols and reviews, and there is guidance in all sections of the template, including the additional information. Every single bit has some guidance about how to complete your review. Not all sections are mandatory. So the equity related assessment section in the results isn't mandatory. And I am going to talk a little bit more about that when I show you those sections. So at protocol stage, several sections on the template will be grayed out. And obviously they're the sections where you're kind of summarising the conclusions of your review and reporting the results. So those won't publish, but we recommend that you leave the text in place in the template, as that'll guide you when you come to write up the full review. So if you enable study-centric data in your review, that doesn't mean that you have to use study-centric data. You can still kind of populate your analyses manually, although we do recommend that you enable study-centric data. And one reason for that is that when it's enabled, the template will then facilitate applying our new guidance around setting up your PICO for your syntheses when you're doing your protocol. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through the slides. Okay, so let's have a look in detail at some of the new sections. Okay, I think as Ella's said, here's what the dashboard looks like in the focused review format template. And as you can see, the review format's been changed. So you'll be using the focused review format here. And also study-centric data has been enabled. And that's, if you look on the actions menu on the right-hand side of that dashboard, that's where you can enable these features in your review. Okay, so talking about some sections in a bit more detail. So if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, there you can see that's what the menu for the in the old format looked like. And as you can see under review information in the old format, you'd be reporting on all these different sections. But in the new format of the review, these sections have been split and put into different parts. So, and this is on the right-hand side of the slide. So when you've got the about the review section, you'll still need to enter information about authors, dates and events, and published notes. But there's a new additional information section in the focused format, and that's where some of this other content has gone. And as you can see, there are two new headings at the bottom on registration and protocol and data and code, and I'll show those in a bit more detail. In terms of differences between protocol and review, we now ask that you report these at the top of your method section. And as you can see in yellow, there's the PRISMA guidance on reporting any changes to your protocol. So this section, so if you have made any changes to your protocol when you've been carrying out your review, this is where you'll highlight what you've done in the methods section. Okay, so as I said, there's a couple of new sections: registration protocol and data, code, and other materials. And there's Prisma guidance in those. And that's where you're going to report about where your review has been pre-registered. And in data, code, and other materials, that's where you're going to provide links so that people can access your supplementary materials, your data package, your search strategy in detail, and other similar kinds of sections. And as Ella said, that's been moved out of the main body of the review to make the main body of the review more readable, but also obviously it's important that users of the review still have access to that information if they want. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the section, the data section in the review template, because that is new. Okay, so this is what this now looks like in the new format. There's your data section, and those are the things that appear in the drop down menus. So your review criteria, I'll talk a little bit in detail about that on the next slide, but just to note that when you complete the section on review criteria, that is not published in the main, when your review is published, that section doesn't publish. As Ella has mentioned, the detailed information about studies, so your included studies, your excluded studies, your studies that you have put in a waiting classification, and also any studies that you've identified as ongoing. So those are no longer going to be published in the main body of your review, but they will be published as supplementary materials. And finally, analyses. So that's all the forest plots that you compile. Again, they're going to be published as supplementary material. So we advise authors that if there are any analyses that you want to showcase in the main body of your review, that you put these in as a figure in the main body of the text. And the detailed, and the forest plots in all their detail will be part of the supplementary material. Okay, this is the review criteria section that I've just mentioned. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this because there are other training sessions available on how to fill this in. Just briefly to note, so this is where you're going to specify your review criteria that's going to enable you to set up your syntheses when you do the review. And it's important to note that that when we talk about syntheses, we're not necessarily just talking about meta-analyses. We're also talking about if you want to do any syntheses by other means, perhaps when you can't put your data together in a meta-analysis. So you'll enter the interventions in the first tab. The second one is where you'll add any broad groups of interventions that you also want to use in syntheses. Your outcomes that you'll want to examine, and it's important to note that when you enter your outcomes, you'll also need to specify time points, which time point you want to measure a particular outcome at. Your covariates, so any covariates that you want to use to put together sensitivity analyses or subgroup analyses. Also, you'll specify how you want to structure your characteristics sections, and finally, how you want to put together your risk of bias sections. Okay, as I said, there is more information about using study-centric data and review criteria, and there's a link there to where to access all that training and information. Okay, so the abstract in the focused review format has been broken down quite a bit. And again, as Ella said, this is really just to encourage people to report everything that they need to report. And so we've broken it down a little bit to make it easier for people. A couple of the new sections are on outcomes and risk of bias. So we want you to, specifically report on what outcomes you measured. We specifically want you to report on how you assessed risk of bias. And there's a couple of new sections there which are sort of more related to the research integrity angle. And so there are new sections on funding, where the funding from your review came from, and also on registration. Again, I've mentioned that before, but this is now going to be in the abstract as well. You're going to need to report on this. So some more new sections. I think, as Ella mentioned, there's a couple of new sections on equity-related assessment and consumer involvement. So these sections will automatically appear when you put together your protocol. It is okay to report in these sections that you didn't consider particularly equity-related considerations while you were doing your review, and that you didn't specifically involve consumers while you were doing your review. However, obviously those sections are in there for a reason, and we would very much like to encourage people to think about equity-related concerns and to involve consumers while you're putting together your review. And I think this is, there's a new equity assessment section in the results as well. And again, as I said, in the results, you can leave this section blank and it won't publish. However, we would very much encourage authors to consider these, to consider health inequity when they're writing their review. And just to note that there will be more guidance on this coming up from Method Support Unit and other sources, and we'll flag the new guidance as it becomes available. Okay, and finally from me, as Ella mentioned, there's the new section on we're asking people to produce tables which specify talk about the included studies and the syntheses in a very kind of summary kind of way, just as an overview. There's some examples there. It's up to you to choose the one that you'd like, that you feel best fits your review, how to provide that overview. And it's important to provide this overview as I said before, that the detailed characteristics tables are now going to be in supplementary material. And just to note, we did run a web clinic on these tables back in December, I think it was, last year. And you can access the recording of that session there. There's a link there to that. Okay, and just finishing up, we'd very much welcome feedback on the template, and you can direct that to our fabulous support team at Cochrane. There's their email address. We continue to develop the template, and there's some iterations listed there. That will be coming on stream in the next couple of months.